All right, guys, welcome back to another edition of the Addictively Speaking podcast. I'm your host, James, and today I have a very special guest. His name is Eric Zink. You can find him all over the internet, YouTube, TikTok, but he has got a recovery story. He's got an addiction story. He's got a story. So, Eric, introduce yourself. Let everybody know who you are and what you do.
My name is Eric. I'm a recovering cocaine alcoholic addict. But first and foremost, I literally do social media full time. It is what I do as a livelihood, and it is essentially sharing my story and helping people with resources and ways to get sober or to talk to their psychiatrist or psychologist. And most of all, just letting people know that they're not alone and maybe finding a nugget of gold that will help them through their life and through their story. And very open about it all. I know that the more that we share, the more that it helps others. I lost a wife and a father to suicide. I've attempted suicide. I got diagnosed with ADHD, PTSD, GAD, and MDD are my official diagnoses. I've self-harmed before. I've been on a variety of medications through trial and error to see if I could find stuff that works. And then lastly, I think in 2020 I got diagnosed with level 1 autism. So I've got to enjoy a lot of different things in life.
Yeah, speaking mildly, really. So with the addiction, what all brought that about? Where did that all start?
I don't know when it necessarily started. I do believe that addiction is a little bit in our genes. There's proven facts and stuff about that. I started drinking at like 14 because I wanted to be cool. I wanted to kind of fit in, and I drank through high school, and I experimented with a lot of psychedelics through high school. I experimented with weed, cocaine, in high school. Just wanted to fit in. Drank a lot more than what I probably should have in high school. Should have realized that there was warning signs when you're passing out in class because you drank too much, or you're just like fighting to not pass out in class. So drinking, I think, was always just kind of there. And then it wasn't until I would say right around 23, I was going through a divorce, and I'd done cocaine in high school before. I grew up in a small town in Michigan, which is in the middle of just nowhere. So whatever was there was probably extremely cut and not much of anything. But I was going through a divorce at 23, and one of my friends I happened to be out with brought up, "Hey, let's get a bag." And that time I will always remember because it hit differently. We were at a dive bar. We got a bag, went out to my car, busted out a CD case, racked it up on that CD case. And I remember doing that line, and it cured everything, or at least it seemed like it did. I was struggling through this divorce. I was struggling with depression. I was struggling with self-esteem. I was like struggling with everything. My world was shattered. And all of a sudden, after doing a line of this, man, I had energy. My anxiety went away. My depression went away. I felt good about myself. Just had this big mood energy. And I thought this was the most amazing substance in the world. And I think that's when it went bad really quick.
Yeah, it seems like, well, you know, I was out. I drank. My thing was drinking to escape and
Okay.
self-medicate. But I realized that like stimulants and stuff like that, they just give you such a, that feeling of euphoria and escape. I mean, it must be, quite addicting straight away, especially if you're going through some shit.
Mm-hmm. And you're going through something, it definitely does. And I was diagnosed originally at 13 with ADD. At 17, I got re-diagnosed with ADHD. This is when all this stuff is new, and people have to remember that this is actually in the 90s. So I got
Yeah.
re-diagnosed with ADHD in like 97. Um,
Okay.
and they put me on Ritalin originally, which is a stimulant.
Yeah.
And I mean, that helped me immensely. I mean, it helped me come out of my shell. It allowed me to have friends. It allowed me to complete tasks. My grades went up. I was happier because I could like vocalize myself better. I didn't feel stupid. Like things registered in my brain differently. They came up with this other miracle substance called Adderall, and so they switched me to that, and it was even better. And I've been on Adderall ever since I was 17. And the worst part is when I actually got off of my Adderall is when I got addicted to, and when my drug use would go through the roof, because it made me feel normal. It was a self-medicating. For whatever reason, with ADHD, it's showing that, excuse me, it's showing that our dopamine is like putting on glasses for us, and we can all of a sudden see, the world. It slows us down in this really weird sense. And so when you have a substance like a stimulant that produces a massive amount of dopamine, it calms you down in this weird sense. And so it was like a form of self-medication for a lot of my life too, unfortunately. Whenever I would be like, oh, I don't need my Adderall and I don't need my medications, like I can do this just fine. And I wouldn't really pay attention to the fact that I became so dependent on these other substances to offset all those effects. Um, and yeah, it's scary because it changes your life in like one little snort.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I bet then all your money goes to that, doesn't it? Or maintaining that habit now that you've
Hmm.
now done, because you've traded your prescription drugs in for street drugs, and now you're having to pay
Well, now
that kind of money
yeah,
for
you're having
that.
to pay, and you don't know what it's cut with, and you don't know what it's mixed with, and it's not with the help of a doctor by any means. And the scary thing about cocaine and what got me hooked to it so easily was, one, I loved alcohol. Like alcohol was always my favorite. I got to the point of drinking 2 to 3 fifths of vodka a day. And I would drink the cheap stuff. I drank for percentages. I didn't drink for taste. Like I didn't care how it tasted. Did it get me drunk?
Yeah,
Um, I was not the type of person that like, let's go somewhere and have a nice cold one. No, we're going
same,
to get
same.
ruined. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
That was my whole
the,
modus operandi. Like, if we were going out and people were like, "Yeah, we're just gonna have a couple," I'm like, "Oh no, I'm getting fucked up.
yeah. Oh
I'm
yeah.
getting
We're,
into
we're
some
going
shit
to
right now."
fucking ruin ourselves, and I will ruin
Yeah,
you. I mean, that was my
yeah,
mission, and it was amazing because Coke would kind of help offset that. So I would self-medicate originally through Coke because the effects of it, people will always say, misinformed, that cocaine will sober you up. And it doesn't. It just provides a stronger effect on your brain that can give the user the perception that you're sober, just kind of like caffeine, like in coffee, makes you think that you woke up. Well, you didn't really wake up. It's just it's a stimulant that has
yeah,
overridden the amount of tired you are. Same when it comes to Coke and alcohol. And man, I would mix the two left and right because it would just help me keep drinking. And to the point that like I don't know what happened, and I would wake up the next day and be like, well, I guess I made it home, and I guess I'm alive still. Next, and I would go back at it.
jeez. I mean, that's terrifying. Like when you hear yourself say stuff like that, do you think like, "Wow, that's crazy," to even that you thought that way?
Yeah, it's crazy that I look at myself in the mirror and I'm still alive.
Yeah,
Like I don't. I mean, because in the depths of my addiction, it was a scary place, man. Like I didn't want to be alive. Um, and I wanted it all to stop. And so I'd almost be upset when I'd wake up, and I would wake up going through withdrawals, um, in a pool of sweat. I'd be start shaking. I knew I had to hurry up and get my ass to work because on the way to work I'd buy alcohol and start drinking on my way to work, to get rid of the shakes to try and feel normal. Um, that it was just such a massive cycle of dependency that you look back at it and you're like, I don't wish that on anybody. But at the time, it was like all you almost knew, and it was like didn't want this life, but I was almost I played such a victim to life that it almost in its own sick way gave me permission to be this fucked up.
yeah. Yeah, I feel like it's similar. Like when I went through my traumatic experience that put me in my downward spiral, everything that happened in life wasn't because of me and my drinking. It was just everything's just so shit. Like, oh, I can't believe this happened again. I'm gonna go out and drink it away. Blah 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 blah. And you just kind of give yourself like permission to be a complete asshole and fuck everything up. And you make the excuse. You make the excuse why you need to use, why you need to go do more.
Oh yeah, man. The victim mentality is the most. I think that's what almost teaches us as an addict how to be manipulative and
Yeah.
so self-centered because so many people don't know the difference between enabling and supporting. And we as an addict, I think, enable ourselves the most where it was always just a poor me. I mean, I'd walk by and stub my foot on something and I'd be like, oh, it's reason to drink. See, the world hates me. Every little thing I could blow out of proportion is just a reason to get fucked up or a
Yeah.
reason why I have to keep using. Or anything that my addiction did and ruined, it wasn't because I was drunk or high as fuck and doing stupid illegal shit. It was the world just hates me and it's not really my fault. Somebody took it the wrong way or whatever it might be because I couldn't own like anything that I did that was wrong. It wasn't me.
Yeah. There was always something else.
Hmm.
Um, so you started mixing the alcohol and the cocaine.
Hmm.
How bad did it get and how fast did it get really bad? And when did you realize like
So
this is this is an
it
issue?
would it would go through phases. I would always drink, and Coke would go through its phases of being bad to so going through like my first divorce, it was bad, and then I realized that this was something that was kind of out of control, spiraling a little bit. I did a lot of changes with my life, slowed down to a lot of the usage on cocaine. Ended up on the road a lot with work, and so I was drinking just a lot. Now all of a sudden, at that period of time, rarely ever using Coke. Um, and it didn't go through the roof stupid until 2015. That's when it went to the worst it ever was for a good, probably I would say it was almost 2 years. My wife committed suicide. We were separated at the time, so my wife and I've been married a few times. I've been married actually 5 times. All of them were my fault. I had to learn how to accept that. At the time, none of them were my fault. I didn't do anything wrong. But and again, it's not wasn't just me, but I own my side of these divorces. But my third wife, when I met her, we were both addicts. She was an alcoholic. I was an alcoholic. Her drug of choice was benzos and coke. She would do with me, and mine was coke. And we were married for 4 years. We ended up getting separated because her drinking got so I was a weird functioning addict. I could eat well I when I drank and stuff like that. I could function as an addict. She couldn't. Got to the point that she had stopped eating, came down with something called Wernicke's. It's where you drink so much alcohol and you're not intaking enough food that the carbs in the alcohol actually block B vitamins and thiamine from absorbing into your brain. So it gives you the onset appearance of almost like dementia or Alzheimer's. Like my wife was like not knowing what day it was. I would come home from work and she'd ask me where I was. And we finally
Wow.
dug into that. She ended up in the emergency room and they had to pump her full of vitamins and stuff in the ICU for 5 days straight. Said that, hey, we need to quit drinking or we're going to die. We were sober for about a month and then we went back to drinking and everything. And we ended up separating. And because I knew that we had to get sober one way or another. And we couldn't get sober together because we were very toxically codependent. I loved her. And because I loved her and it was very toxic, she could tell me she needed alcohol or wanted alcohol, and I'd bring home alcohol. Um, and so we were separated for almost a year. She lived in Arizona and I was in California working at the time. And August 27th, 2015, I got a call from a sheriff's department in the state of Arizona letting me know they found my wife's body and she committed suicide. And that wasn't part of my plan. And I already had from like a childhood experience, like I didn't have a bad childhood. I came from a very successful family, actually. My dad was a very successful doctor. I was like the redheaded stepchild of the family. And I think that kind of happens in a lot of addict families. Dad's mom, super successful, brother, very successful. And here I am. I was very successful at making money, but I was just a fuck up. And I had already some abandonment trauma and issues that I didn't realize since being a kid and self sabotage and all this. And And now the person that I love just fucking killed herself. Left suicide notes and everything behind. And I had to make a couple drives out, and I had to put her in the ground. And that fucked me up. And the only coping I knew, instead of going to therapy and finding trauma therapy and all of this, was alcohol made it go away. And I started having this really firm belief that just everyone's kind of going to leave me. And it went from August until October. It went from a couple beers a day, maybe a 6-pack a day, or a quarter bottle of Fireball a day, to a fifth of vodka a day. And then it just kept getting worse. And then throwing in the mix of, all of a sudden it went from an 8-ball of cocaine, which is 3.5 grams, lasting me 2 weeks, to it lasting me only a week, to within just a couple weeks, I'm doing an 8-ball a day. And now my drinking is picking up. And it just made me forget. I didn't deal with her suicide at all. I didn't deal with any of my emotions at all. And I literally numbed everything. And for pretty much 2 years straight, just proceeded to destroy my life as best as I could. And as my everything just kept increasing, I had no desires to get sober. And I kept adding stuff to the mix to ruin my life. And I just remember even driving on the wrong side of roads, hoping that a cop would pull me over and arrest me and I'd get a DUI. Like, it was bad, man. Like, going to work at 7:30 in the morning, and I'm doing fat rails of Coke in the car after I've already drank a bottle of vodka. Fucked up, so fucked up. Going into work and being always so fucked up at work that people thought that was normal me. Like, people are like, how did nobody ever notice that you were like fucked up at work? And it was because if I went into work sober, they wouldn't recognize me or know they would think something was wrong with me if they saw me sober. They just thought that's how he is. And that's fucked up. That's so screwed up. And like, looking back at it, people will tell me all the time, like, because I've watched like a lot of my videos and stuff, and people will be like, oh, you're living the life and you're living the dream. And it's like, no, I don't own a gun for a reason, because during that time, if I did, I would have painted my brains all over the fucking walls.
Yeah.
Like, I was in such a pit of misery and despair. I mean, the scary part about addiction, you probably relate to this, is even as an alcoholic, when we're drinking and we're using alone. This isn't a party anymore. It's not like we're hanging out with all of our friends and friends all go home and we're all like, okay, let's pack it up for the night. Later, guys, no, dude, people leave and it's like, okay, well, this is just getting started. And now 3, 4 in the morning, you're by yourself, just going on one strong. And addiction is a lonely ass place.
Yeah, and I mean, even if you're surrounded by a ton of people, like, your motives are different than their motives. Their motives are to have this party and have a good time, and your motive is to destroy yourself. And that's, and I think a lot of the people around me, they were drinking heavy as well. Like, I surrounded myself with those people, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't look so out of place, but I was doing stuff that they weren't necessarily doing. Like, I was getting into the bar fights, I was getting the DUIs, I was getting into the shit because I was
Mm-hmm.
self-destructing, but I kind of insulated myself with these people around me who were drinking quite heavy. So it just looked like I was just, oh, he just went a little too far that time, or, oh, whatever. Kind of got brushed off. I kind of hid myself in plain sight. I did have moments where I did have the yell out for help. Like, I had a suicide attempt as well, but it was just like a panic thing. It was everybody fucking look now. Like, I have a problem. I don't know why you guys aren't fucking noticing this.
Right.
And, kind of like, hey, but, it was only short lived. It got me sober for like 9 months, and then I relapsed and went back just as hard as I was before, because I thought, like, I listened to other people for validation, and they were just like, no, man, you're good. Look at you, just in 9 months. How could you have a problem with alcohol? Like, you just been 9 months sober. And I was like, you know what? you're fucking right. And then it was like, you
The
know?
worst is when you go a week sober and you're like, I owe myself a beer. I did this. You
You're
know, and
so
then
proud of yourself. You're
then the
like, hey,
relapse
man,
hits.
good
Yeah,
job, good job. You
yeah.
know, and even towards the end of my drinking, I was doing, like I was trying to I was in that like pre-contemplation phase where you're thinking about it, but you're not really thinking about it. And I'm like, I definitely have a problem. And then, there's the mind arguing, like, no, you don't, no, you don't. You can moderate, try to moderate. So, you go out and you have like one. And I went out one time and I had 3 beers, went home, and I was like, fucking star, man. You did it. 3 beers. And the next time it was like 3 beers, 2 rum and cokes, and a shot. That's enough. And then it just kept building its way up. And then before I know it, I'm just drinking as hard as I was before. So moderation was not the answer.
Yeah, no, it's amazing how it also, like, I don't know about you, but like my last relapse, I remember I'd gotten sober for almost 90 days because my wife at the time told me I was getting fat, and I freaked out because I was vain, and I was. I got up to like 315. I was a big boy,
Oh,
and out of my vainness, I was like, okay, I'll quit. So I quit cold turkey, and it lasted almost 90 days. And I remember we were at our grandparents for Christmas, and they're all breaking out Coronas, and I had probably just like 2 sips out of that neck of a beer. And I was like, man, this is gross. Like, I'm so proud of myself. Look at that, man. 90 days, and I'm lost some weight already. My clothes are fitting better. I don't know what happened, but within a week, I was back to a bottle a day, you know? And I'm like, what?
yeah.
But it was also always just the poor me. I, I never really wanted to get sober in a lot of ways because I knew if I got sober, I had to deal with all the pain and trauma um, of my life, and I didn't want to do that. And this was helping me avoid it all, and at the same time, be the victim of life.
What
And that's
yeah, what pushed you in the direction of because like you just said, like you didn't want to get sober. Like what put you in that direction or that mindset of trying to get to like getting clean and getting sober?
I wasn't supposed to. So ended up losing my job. My wife, I was cheating on her. I had a job that was paying me 40, 50,000 a month. I was a general manager of RV dealerships, motorhomes and stuff. And I
Mm.
always have made phenomenal money. Unfortunately, sales is well known for alcohol and drugs. And I ended up losing this job because of drug usage and alcohol, all that. Losing my marriage, rock bottom again. Used to make all this money, nothing to show for it. And I remember sobbing. I'm like, dude, I got to get sober. I knew that I had to. I knew that alcohol and coke played a major role in it. And it was like the one thing that always happened. This was a cycle of my life that would happen like every 4 years. Is I would just destroy. It would get so bad, I would just destroy everything. And I don't know, man. Like 3 months, 4 months later, life would be back to normal, put back together, everything great. But I was like, no, I really need to fucking quit. And so I told everybody I was an alcoholic. They are all already knew. I mean, I've tried to quit before, had tons of AA chips, but this was like the first time that I outright admitted to people like I was an alcoholic. I was too ashamed and embarrassed to tell them I was a coke addict because the stigma around cocaine was like, you can't really get addicted to that. It's not like heroin or opiates or any of these other substances. It's fucking cocaine, dude. And the movies show it as like a party drug. And I was like, maybe
Highly
I'm on like,
addictive.
maybe there's just something wrong with me. Later on, I find out there's a lot of people actually that struggle with cocaine addiction.
Yeah,
But
tons of them.
yeah, so I start, going to AA, and I separate from my wife. Um, and I'm like 3 weeks sober. And my plan was, man, if I can get sober for like 90 days, 120 days, I can relapse and just be the victim again, and everything will be back to normal. I'll prove to myself that I had control over it. I'm not really an addict. I'm just.
Mm.
And I always leaned on my dad a lot for support. My dad was really always kind of there for me. And so, I was talking to him every day, and he was proud of me for getting sober. because this time was going to be different, man. This time was going to be different. The only thing that I changed up differently this time was I was going to more AA meetings than what I did before. Um, and then August 13th, 2017 was so I was sober for 3 weeks. It's literally the third week. I got my 24-hour chip that day. I was so proud of it. I even was marking like the week ones, you know, of, hey, I made it a week. Hey, I made it 2 weeks. Hey, I made it 3 weeks. And I told my parents I wasn't going to call them that weekend because whenever I would go through shit, I'd fall back onto my parents. They're going to help enable me eventually. And I wasn't going to call them that weekend. And my brother ended up calling me. My wife and I at the time, we were trying to make things work, and I was over at our old place cooking dinner, and we were trying to like date each other to see if we could salvage our marriage. And I get a call from my brother, and he's like 3 hour time difference than me. And I'm like, Jesus, it's like 1 a.m. where he's at. Like, this isn't like my brother to call me at 1 in the morning. I'm like, maybe it was a pocket dial or something wrong, you know. Calls me again. I don't pick up. Calls me again. I'm like, something's wrong. So I call him back, and I'm like, hey, what's going on? And he goes, hey, they found Dad's body. He committed suicide. And I'm just like, you gotta be fucking kidding me. Because my dad helped me through my wife's suicide. So almost 2 years on the dot, my dad commits suicide. And I was in just so much disbelief. And it was almost like the only thing I had to really grasp onto to like even remember him was my sobriety. And it actually drove me further into like, I'm actually gonna get sober. Because I hated him. I was so mad at him. So fucking angry. How could you fucking do this? So my sobriety was driven by a lot of just raw anger, hatred. I'm going to prove you wrong motivation, which was very powerful motivation. It got me sober to the point all of a sudden that I wanted to truly be sober, and kept me sober, and then kept me through the whole recovery process of learning about trauma and all that. And that was really the driving force behind it, of giving me something else to focus on besides the fact that he just died. And it screwed me up even more because my birthday is August 17th. So my wife killed herself 10 days after my birthday. My dad killed himself 4 days before my birthday.
Oh
So it was
man.
one of those things that I didn't even realize the
Wow.
psychological damage that did until I didn't go into like deep trauma therapy until 2021 actually.
Hmm.
Um, but I didn't realize the damage that does to somebody of like, hey, you have a wife and a dad who just killed themselves the same month as your birthday. Like that's
Yeah.
abandonment, buddy. That hits you on a psychological level that really fucks you up.
Yeah.
But I stayed sober through that whole process and really leaned a lot into recovery, um, and finding hobbies. And I kind of found sobriety like my own way. I started going back to my psychiatrist, and I got back on my meds. Started having a lot of like panic attacks and stuff, and went back to psychiatrist. Put me on Xanax, which is a benzo. I was only on that luckily for about a month and a half, because panic attacks are typically from like massive underlying stressors is what brings them on, and suicide typically does that. And I didn't want to relapse like I did with when my wife killed herself. I fucking went on one, and I was like, dude, I don't want to do that this time. Like, I want to prove this motherfucker wrong. So because I wanted to prove my dad wrong in this weird sense so bad, that I started like finding different ways of how do I protect the sobriety that I have now all of a sudden. And so I started finding, things that would fill my time and hobbies, and I focused in and buckled in on work. And that helped for a while. 2018 April is when I actually started all my social media stuff. I wanted to start a nonprofit to help people with suicide and
Hmm.
addiction. And it just kind of went from there. But I tell people, like, I think we all kind of get sober our own way. Like, there's not a right or wrong way. And I think
Yeah.
that's what sets so many people up for failure is we're like, well, how did you get sober? What did you do? So if I do exactly what you do, I'm going to get sober. And it's like,
Yeah.
no, it doesn't work that way. Like, you got to find what's going to work for you.
Yeah.
And I think that's a lot of times our addict brain thinking, well, if I can do, if it worked for somebody, it has to work for me.
Yeah. Like we're all the
And then when
same in
it,
some way. Yeah.
yeah,
Like
and
all,
then if
yeah.
it
Like,
doesn't work, it's like, okay, it didn't work for me. I relapse, so obviously there's something even more wrong with me. So I'm just going to keep using now because it's just pointless to even try and get sober. It's like this weird self-sabotage we do.
yeah. Or they think like it'll never work because it didn't work that one time, that one way. It's like
Hmm.
if you fail at like a 12 step, then you're like, "Ma, that's it. Like
Right.
there's no way I'm going to be able to do this because I can't do that, so I can't do this."
Hmm.
And I don't think that's not my belief. I think like um especially in recovery, I think we need to like just be a lot more open with pathways to recovery and how different they really are. Like our stories, like we can kind of like we share like similar things, me and you and other addicts. We have similar things that we have gone through or that we've experienced, but our ways to the recovery path are so different, you know? And I think we need to embrace that a lot more with recovery is that people need to, just know that if it doesn't work this way, look for other ways, look for other things, implement things from different ways of recovery to make your own way.
No, I 1,000% agree with that. And that's the thing. I think I started to find joy again in recovery, and why I started sharing even about it again on my social media platforms was because I don't know. I guess in the last probably three years, I've seen a lot more open mindedness in how to get sober. It's no longer the 12 steps are the only steps.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people that would self sabotage themselves to make sure that they wouldn't get sober because they're like, well, I don't believe in God, so the 12 steps isn't going to work for me and all this. And I'm like, well, I get where you're coming from because, like, trust me, I've been there before too, where I've dropped to my fucking knees and prayed. And, well, you know what? I still had my fucking issue. It didn't solve it immediately like addiction did. Now, the difference is going, okay, what do I need to take ownership with in this? What did I just do to create this experience that I'm going through right now? Let me own this. Now that I've owned it, I have a clearer vision of how to get myself out of it and what to do is the next step to it. You know what I mean? And so I love seeing just that so many people have this open mindedness so much more when it comes to addiction and getting sober. Then there's only this one way. And if it doesn't work for you, well, then you're fucked.
Yeah. Yeah. I think too, like social media and like I see a lot on TikTok and other social media where, people share their journeys, they share their recovery with other people. And I think that's awesome because it's quite inspiring that you can see people go through like the beginning stages of it, where they start
Hmm.
from and how they progress as time goes on and what happens through that journey.
Oh,
Because their
yeah.
journey is it's awesome and it's unique to them, but it also can shed hope to other people who are thinking about like getting sober and they just don't really know how or they don't know who to reach out to or what are their options available to them. Because I don't know, like when I was growing up, like all you ever heard of was 12 step. That was it.
Hmm.
If you didn't do AA or you didn't do NA, then that's it. How do you get sober? And that's not the case anymore. There's so many options and outlets and people doing and trying different things. And then, there's like, people like you and myself on with podcasting and content creating, sharing experiences that people can take from.
Hmm. No, and it's very true, and I think that's what it is. It's like you're looking for like pieces of it's like panning for gold is the way I always looked at it. There's a ton of people out there, and everything that they say isn't going to resonate or work for you. But if you could find one little nugget of gold and take that little nugget
Yeah.
from this person, and this nugget from this person, and this from this person, you literally create your own recovery now and your own recovery story because it is so different. And like you said, like even when I was getting sober in like 2017, all I was told about was NA and AA. And then I heard of like, you could go back, you could go to rehab, but it was always made out to be like, well, rehab is like, a psych ward type deal. No one even explained to me exactly
Yeah.
what rehab was like. Um, I didn't realize that alcohol withdrawal was deadly, so I just raw dogged it, and I'm glad that I'm still here and I didn't die. Um, and there just wasn't as much information out there so readily available as there is now. And it didn't seem like, and there probably were, but you have so much more access to people who willingly want to help at least direct people
Yeah.
towards different resources or open up their mind to the possibilities of sobriety so much more.
Yeah, I think too is that with addiction and recovery, the stigma that goes along with it being labeled an addict or a junkie or whatever. And now I think it's been broken down a bit more where people are more accepted in recovery. And recovery is like they have a community, they have voices, and they do good things in the world and they help people. And like I think the biggest thing I've noticed too, like because I've done this podcast now for a year and a half and interviewing many people, and their sense of willingness to give back to others I think is very amazing. That they're willing to share their shit, their shittiest shit, so that somebody doesn't have to go through that. And I think that's amazing. Like it's a beautiful thing.
It is. It really is. And that was the whole thing I loved about, a huge part of sobriety is the wanting to help one another, you know, um, and the open mindedness and kindness and welcomingness, but I also, I see the flip side too with the social media aspect of it, with that has sprouted a lot of sobriety coaches.
Oh, yes.
It has sprouted a lot of different things out there that I kind of look at and I'm like, all right, we'll see how this goes.
I mean, yeah, I get it. I've actually met a couple of recovery coaches. They run recovery academies. I've done some of the workshops. So for me, I thought it was cool because it is quite a different environment and it's a different, you know what I mean? Like it just seems so
Mhm.
different than what you're used to. And I think, for some people that's what they need is different,
It
and
definitely, oh, go ahead.
not that 12 step or not that, do you know what I mean? Or not that certain thing that's very like, like you said, oh, I don't believe in God, so that's not gonna work, or that, I don't believe in that book and I don't want to do the steps or whatever. They offer the flip side to that. What's the flip side to that? How does that work? And how does that help people? You know, at the end of the day.
Exactly. And I do agree with that. But as long as it's always to the thing of if this doesn't work for you, don't give up because there's still more ways. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
that's the biggest thing is I love when I see people who keep no matter what, keep an open mind and don't give up is what it's all about, like for me. And that's the part that really inspires me with a lot of people is just the don't give up. Um, because I know as an addict, especially with me when I was getting sober, it was so much like I wanted the answers. And I'm sure you get a lot of that too, where people be like, hey man, what do I do? Like, I don't know
Yeah.
what you do. I
Yeah.
honestly don't know. I can tell you what worked for me.
Mhm.
I can tell you don't give up, but I can also tell you this, it's gonna suck. You're gonna fight for it. You're gonna have to want it really fucking bad. And part of this whole journey is you finding your way.
Yeah.
Um, and when I think people truly embrace that is when you see some of these just amazing stories happen.
Yeah.
Um,
But it's a lot of
so
the accepting what's happening. Like accept own your shit. Like what you said. Like for me, that was a big thing. Was like owning your shit. If you can own your shit, like that's half the battle right there. You just kind of open the door because you've owned it now. You know what's wrong. You're admitting it to you. So I think
I
that's
think
hugely
that
important.
I do too. I think that's the one thing that across the board is the one thing that is similar still with everyone is if you really want to be sober is to admit it because that's when you're truly committed. because you do run
Hmm.
into so many people who are like, well, I can't tell my family. No, no, but how about I tell, my one best friend who keeps all my secrets and stuff? I'll tell them. And it's like, yeah, no, you're not owning it. You're
Yeah.
hiding it still. That's your enabling side of the poor me side. That, yeah, it sucks to go up to your family and look at them and be like, hey, guess what, motherfuckers? I'm a fucking addict.
Yeah. I have
And
a
guess what? It's
problem.
not your fault. It's my fault. It's my fault I'm an addict, not you guys.
Yeah, but I mean, at a point in time, like, I mean, they know. Like my mom, she knew there was a problem. She told me for years. She's like, "You need to get sober. You need to get clean." And I was just like, "Nah, not interested. Like, I'm not gonna do that." But it's a tough battle because you have to look at the people you love and then tell them no while they're telling you like they love you the most and they're the ones telling you you have a problem and you're the one going, "Do I? I don't know." So yeah, once you
I
own
think,
that shit.
dude, I love that you said that because it makes me laugh so hard because I think we're all that way where we don't want to admit to family and friends and all that, like you said. Like we don't. And we're so embarrassed. And
Yeah.
what are they going to think about us and all of this?
Mhm.
But they
Absolutely.
know, they already
They
know.
know, yeah, they know.
And like when you tell them, you almost expect like this whole big like celebration and fucking fireworks. Like, oh my God, he came out and told us he's an addict. And in reality, they're all like, yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And so what are you going to do about it now? And you're
Yeah, how
like,
are you
well,
fixing this?
I just told you, like, how did you even know? And they're like, you think I'm fucking stupid?
Yeah. My big thing at the end, like, right before I got sober was, like, the nervous point was telling my friends, 'cause I knew my mom, she'd be over the moon, right? I knew 'cause she knew. She'd been telling me for years, "Get sober, get sober." But for some reason, I was worried about telling my friends. I didn't know why, but it just gave me a bit of anxiety. And then when I told them, and I was just like back in the day, just sending the text, and I'm like, and there's like burp, 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 and I'm like, oh shit, somebody answered. So I look at it, and they're like, yeah, man, that's amazing. Like, I think that's good. I think that's a good idea. And I was like, well, shit, I thought there was gonna be way more pushback or way more. Oh no, dude, you don't have a problem. They were all like, yeah, absolutely. If that's what you think you need, and I was like, shit, if I'd have known this 4 years ago, you know,
Uh
maybe I
huh.
would have got sober sooner, but I don't know.
Oh yeah, but it's how our brain, I think, tricks us. I mean, it's like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I mean,
Mm,
our brain, we have so many conversations in our own head and so many outcomes in our own head that we have created that we almost buy into as the truth. That,
yeah.
I mean, when you do start coming out and telling all these people that you're an addict and this is what you're struggling with, and everybody, the ones I think that aren't supportive are typically the ones that you don't want in your life to begin with.
Yeah, and they were never
um,
your friends to begin with. Yeah, they were
yeah.
just around. They were just around to get fucked up anyway. Like,
Right. And then you have this core group of people who are like, dude, I support you and whatever. And you're just like, well, this isn't what I played out in my head is happening. And
yeah,
then it almost starts chiseling away at all these fake beliefs you had about your addiction. And you're like, dude, like maybe reality is it is better sober, or maybe in reality it is. And that's the thing, is even when it comes to addiction, is it doesn't fix itself right away. And that's what, like, I would self-sabotage myself in getting sober a lot. And AA I would use to enable myself to relapse, because in AA you read the big book, and there's a lot of stories in there about how, getting divorced and life is crumbling, and man, as soon as he got sober his life got fixed and wife came back and big happy family. Guess what, dude? That ain't fucking reality. I'm sorry, man, it don't fucking work that way. And a year and a month into me getting sober, I attempted suicide because I couldn't get my fucking brain right. Like, yeah, I was sober, but I still hated my fucking life. I hated everything. I was depressed. I was just, I had already started doing social media telling people that they fucking matter. And I think it was my own almost, affirmations to tell myself that I fucking mattered, because I didn't think I did. And I wanted to fucking just end it. And it took me a long time to really realize that, dude, like, it's going to take your brain a while to level out the chemicals that you just fucked up in it. It's going to take you a while to realize of, how to be normal again. And it's not, 2 months later, I always laugh when I see people that are, oh man, 2 weeks, 2 months sober, dude. My life's the greatest it's ever fucking been. And good. Well, keep that energy up, because it's going to be this up
Yeah.
and down for a while until it levels off. Like, I love the energy. I will never bash somebody for the energy. Keep it going. But remember that energy when you're sobbing, fighting off a relapse, going, is this really worth it?
Yeah.
Because it's a process. It's a journey. And I think each time you fight through that, you just become stronger and stronger. And then you start realizing and growing even more as a human being.
Yeah, and I think the thing is too is that you coming into sobriety, like you now have to deal with life on life's terms, and you have to learn how to cope with shit, like for real, like real life. Like you have to learn how to deal with things, emotions, which are something that most addicts try to numb away or to drink away or to drug away, right? So now you're dealing with those live and in color, and it's a learning curve because you don't really know how to do that. And it's really weird to like have all these emotions and they all kind of hit you at one time and you're like, fuck, what was that?
Uh-huh.
Maybe you have to learn how to cope and like move through it and then figure out what are your new coping skills? What am I going to do today to cope with life? Because if you don't put anything in place, if you don't try to figure out how to deal with things differently, it's so easy to just be like, well, I know what worked last time, to go back because it's a quick fix.
And I think it's so important of what you said with that, and I don't think a lot of people realize is it is about coping skills. You have to realize and learn how to cope. You have to cope with boredom. You have to cope with the depression, the anxiety, and it's a variety of different feelings. It could be one thing one day and it's something the next day, and you almost have to have this toolbox that you can reach into and go, okay, here's how I'm feeling right now. Let me be honest about what my emotions are. Okay, now what do I do about this? Because this is how I'm feeling right now. Because the heal all, cure all in our whole head is I just go hit a bottle real quick and it all goes away.
Yeah.
And well, I don't want that. So now I have to confront this. Fuck.
Yeah. And that's the hard part is figuring out how do you confront it and deal with it. And
Uh
then,
huh.
learning how to do that consistently over time and becoming better at it and more self-aware and more like, I'm 12 years sober, but I still have problems. You know what I mean? Like my life is better than it was before, but like by no means is it perfect. You know what I
Uh
mean?
huh.
Like I constantly have issues. I deal with depression and anxiety, uh, which was I left untreated for a long time because I thought like I was managing it, and
Hmm.
realized recently that I'm not really managing it, and that I maybe need some help. And I got some medication, and I feel tremendously better. And it's weird because I was so I was against it. I was against doing that. I could maintain it myself. I could do it myself. And then I had to say, you know what? No, just get on some antidepressant and see if it changes things. And it did, and it did. And I'm really grateful that I listened to myself. Because before I wouldn't have. I would have just kept going in the same trajectory. And like, hopefully, it
And
helps. It
that's
helps. It really
and that
does.
that's the scary thing about how sobriety used to be. Is it used to be, you got to get off of almost everything and anything and all. And it's like, no, man, like our brains are very complex. We know a lot more about our brain than we did when NA and A, well, especially we know a lot more than when AA was started. Um, and science has come a lot further and all of that. And,
Yeah.
medication I look at is just tools along the way. And, I struggle with it a lot with recovery even too, is, I went to one of the things that got me out of NA is I used to get in a lot of arguments and fights. Not I wouldn't say a lot, but I gotten two of them that really stood out, and I was like, "Fuck this," because I had learned, I'm dependent on Adderall, which is a stimulant. It is an
Hmm.
amphetamine salt. It doesn't pass the brain-blood barrier, so not quite like meth, but it does have similar properties to it. And I take a small dose. I take 10 milligrams in the morning and 10 milligrams in the afternoon. I have to remember to take this stuff. I forget to take it half the time. I set alarms in my phone to remind myself, and even then, I still forget because it's just not a priority. And I would go to these meetings, and they'd be like, "Well, you need to stop. You need to get off of this. That's a stimulant, you know. And ADD is just an ADHD is just made up, and that's all in your head." And I was like, "Well, every time I got off of this, I couldn't control any of my thoughts. I couldn't control my head very well, and well, I would relapse. So you know what? So far, I have a pretty well proven track record of being on my prescription that I don't relapse on this obsession of alcohol and cocaine. So I'm going to stick to the prescription with my psychiatrist. But thank you."
Yeah.
And you know, I'd get this long lecture of how, well, you're not sober then and all this, and I'm like, you know, sobriety's different, dude. Like, I got on Xanax when my dad committed suicide, so I wouldn't start using coke and alcohol to calm my panic attacks down or to avoid panic attacks. So guess what? This benzo, which, yes, I know there's people here at this meeting that are addicted to benzo, helped me with the use, with going through it with my doctor and open about addiction with my doctor. I was on it for a short period of time and got back off of it without any withdrawals. Great. Hoorah. It worked how it was supposed to with me. It doesn't do that with everybody, though. It's trial and error, you
Yeah.
know?
Hmm.
So I do think that you have to be really open-minded to just the different ways of getting sober. And I love that you said that, because I think medication plays a huge role, you know?
Yeah, and
Our,
I think too, you know, medically speaking, like talking to a doctor, a psychologist, or a psychiatrist, medically, there's benefits of it. You know, and I've just watched the end of what's it called, Dope Sick. I don't know if
mm,
you've watched Dope Sick,
mhm.
but you know how they're talking about like Suboxone and methadone and stuff like that, and people will attack other people in recovery and be like, "Well, you're not off, you're still on," and it's like, yeah, but they're not shooting heroin in an alleyway. Like, why are you knocking that? Like, they're they are sober. They're not using heroin. Let's just applaud that. Like, don't say I don't get that because it's helping them. And you know what? If they can come off it, that's great. But if they can't, I mean, it's something that helps them not OD in an alleyway or take fentanyl by accident and die instantly. Like,
Yeah, no, it's, I
we should be a little bit more lenient.
no, and I totally agree with that, you know, and I agree, and that was one of the other issues I had a lot with people when it came to like Suboxone, and methadone, of like, well, if you're not sober on Suboxone, okay, well, this person's life isn't dictated around getting the Suboxone. Like, yes, it helps with the withdrawals, but it's not this obsession like heroin is or opiates are.
Yeah.
You know, they're taking it as prescribed with a doctor. They're not popping 60, 70 pills in a day. They're not having the nod, and they're fading in and out. They're not ODing. They're not, like you said, they're being productive members of society now
Yeah.
instead of not. Like there's so much benefits to it. And I agree with you 1,000%. Like, if somebody gets off of heroin and they're on Suboxone the rest of their life, so be it.
Exactly.
Okay.
You know,
Like,
it's like, yeah, yeah, why are
why do
we
we why do
saying
we have to
what?
knock somebody down constantly? You know, that's the other problem I always had, even when it came to like recovery and relapses. You know, and you know, I watch some of this time social media. I try to actually stay off of social media as much as I can because it fucks up my head a lot. And I'll get on the ones where I'll watch somebody has relapsed and they're taking down all their NA keychains, or they're taking all their coins and they're dumping them in a box because they relapsed. And I'm like, dude, you had 2 years of sobriety. That you learned a lot. Good, you're alive. You didn't die. You're going back
Yeah.
at it. Sweet. You didn't lose the 2 years of sobriety that you just had. You
Yeah.
learned a lot in that. You know what to bring into this time, and you also know this time what to avoid also that could make you relapse. Like, it's all growth and learning. Like, don't beat yourself up. it's not
Yeah.
it's not to shame you, because I think the more that you shame somebody who goes through a relapse, the more it gets them to the point that they just enable themselves to keep using and not even go back at it.
Oh, I would agree with that 100%. I think the more we blow up on these people, or like people do that kind of stuff, or like say, comments in the, comment sections in recovery pet. Like, it's petty, it's stupid. Like, so what? They had a relapse. Like,
Yeah.
okay, yeah. Oh, and get back at it. Start working the program, whatever one you're in or whatever you're doing, and go. Keep going. It doesn't matter. It's not the end of it, and that's
Right.
easy for me to say. I've never like relapsed in my 12-year period. I mean, I had periods of sobriety before and relapse, so I get it. I understand. But we shouldn't let that ruin everything that you've done. And I think for the longest time that was like one of the things that always scared me. Like, if I ever did, I would I'd be mortified. I'd be horrible. But you have to just think like life happens, man. Shit happens. Like
Uh-huh.
accidents, you mess up. You got to learn from it. Like you said, personal growth, keep growing, keep building yourself up, and you know.
Hmm.
But that's the scary thing about the internet, man, is that people can say anything at any time. I saw on a recovery chat somebody said that they were really struggling with staying sober, and they were only a couple days clean, and somebody commented, "Have a drink." I was like, "Come on, man. What are we doing? Like, why are you in a recovery chat if you're gonna say shit like that? That's horrible. Horrible
Uh, the,
stuff."
the trolls out there. I mean, I think the internet and social media is phenomenal in a lot of ways, and great for resources, and great for making a difference. And then the unfortunate flip side of it is it's great for not even bullies per se. I really think trolls is the best term.
Mhm.
Uh, that literally just get off on being that piece of shit, you know? That's why, even when it comes to social media for myself, like I know if I went through a lot of my comments, I'd probably want to eat myself out a window. Because my wife will even go through like some of my contents and she comments and she'll be like, dude, had you, I'm like, no, I don't read them because I know that. And, I have a video, couple million views. Okay. It has 100,000 comments. Okay. Half of those are going to be great comments, positive comments.
Absolutely.
20% of those is going to be who I don't even know why they're commenting. And
Yeah.
30% of them are going to be horrific. And so why even deal with it? Why deal with it? I literally, whenever I post anything now on social media, I will check it for usually 1 to 2 minutes after I posted it. And if
No,
somebody
that's
happens
it.
to comment in that time, I will respond back to them and then I'm done with it. I do not ever go back to those comments because
That's
I
probably for the
don't.
best.
Oh yeah, it protects your mental health. I know how to. I've learned a lot of ways to protect my peace.
That's good. That's amazing. That's amazing. Um, so before we wrap everything up, I would love to ask you. I always ask at the end of my podcast, and I think we've alluded to this. You've alluded to this through the podcast as well. I like to ask, what are the three things you need in your recovery to get through it? Like, like some people like fitness, some people like yoga or journaling or art or whatever. What are the three things? Because I want to give people tools for their toolbox, man. I want people to have those nuggets you were talking about. Like, pick one from here, pick one from there.
The three things I think that somebody needs is one is the honesty. I think that's one of the biggest things of it all. I think it is a understanding of what trial and error is, and knowing that it's okay to have fucking bad days. Because, like for me, honesty helps keep me sober. If I'm just honest and I don't bullshit and I'm just straight to the point and maybe come off as an asshole, whatever, it's my opinion and I know that. And I even tell people, like, hey, no offense, I don't like the word trigger. To me, it's a bitch word and I'm being the victim here. But that's just me. And I don't say it to upset anyone. I have to be real about it, though. If I start using the word triggered, I know how I use that. I use that as the poor me, poor Eeyore. I'm the victim of life person. Oh my God, he triggered me or she triggered me, whatever it is. So I don't use that word. I tell people that. And for some people, it works. Cool. So just be
Oh,
honest with yourself. Trial and error will find what works for you. Like for me, it took me a while to really realize that working out does help. Vitamins help. Um, Routine helps. Like there's a lot that helps, but it's finding what works for you because what works for all of us is different, and realizing that, you can break down and you can have these hard days, I think is really important to be able to look in the mirror and go, you know what, today's just a fuck day. And admitting to it and not running from it. And just let the day suck, man. Embrace that suck. And then you kind of learn from embracing the suck of like, what made today so fucking sucky? Well, you know what? It was my fault that I woke up late, so I showed up to work late. And I got yelled at because I was at work, and you kind of, okay, let me change these habits or whatever so I don't have as much sucky days. So I mean, that's what worked for me.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much. Honestly, I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate your time. Do
Yeah,
you want to let
definitely, man.
everybody know your social media stuff before we get
Yeah,
off?
yeah, just go to ericbzink.com. I have everything there. I
Awesome.
I'm on all the platforms, and even with this, I'll make sure I repost this on my stuff, because I appreciate people who bring awareness to it. I appreciate the realness and the rawness, and there should be no ego in recovery, because I mean, people fucking die.
Yeah,
And
every
so I
day.
think just the more vulnerable and the more real we are, I respect that to the utmost.
Absolutely. That's why I think like we need to share our stories unapologetically, whatever
Hmm.
the shit, like you said, and it's owning it too. It's owning it is a big part of that because like I'm telling you all the bad shit or the way people I've hurt, the big people I've affected, like so I'm being very honest about like my journey in
Hmm.
hopes that it helps somebody else, you know?
Hmm.
So hopefully I hit that one person and that's all that really matters.
Exactly.
All right, Eric. Well, thank you for being here. I appreciate your time and it's been amazing.
Definitely, brother. I appreciate it.